Elliot Carter was not a man who believed in fate. He liked to think that everything, good or bad, happened because of choices, actions, and sometimes sheer dumb luck. But as his battered escape pod hurtled through the atmosphere of an alien planet, he couldn't help but wonder if some cosmic force had decided to play a cruel joke on him. It all started with a routine delivery mission. Elliot was just another cog in the vast machinery of interstellar trade, working aboard a small cargo ship called the Stardust Drifter. The ship wasn't much to look at, its hull patched together from spare parts, its engines groaning under the weight of years. But it got the job done. That day, they were hauling supplies to a human colony on the edge of known space. It should have been easy, boring even. But then came the malfunction. Deep in the void between stars, one of the ship's reactors began to overheat. Alarms blared as red lights flashed across the cockpit. Captain Rhea shouted orders, her voice tight with panic, while the crew scrambled to contain the situation. Elliot, ever the problem solver, dove into the maintenance tunnels beneath the deck, tools clanking against the metal walls as he worked frantically to reroute power. For a moment, it seemed like he might succeed. Then came the explosion, a deafening roar that shook the entire vessel. "Abandon ship," Captain Rhea's voice crackled over the intercom. "Repeat, abandon ship." Elliot didn't hesitate. Grabbing his emergency kit, he sprinted toward the nearest escape pod bay. By the time he strapped himself into the cramped capsule, the rest of the crew had already launched theirs. With trembling hands, he punched the coordinates for the nearest habitable planet into the navigation system and hit the eject button. And that was when things went truly sideways. Instead of gliding smoothly toward safety, Elliot's pod veered wildly off course. Warning sirens screamed inside the tiny compartment as readings on the control panel flickered erratically. Outside the window, the endless blackness of space gave way to streaks of color, auroras of light dancing across the sky. Before he could process what was happening, the pod slammed into something solid, sending him spinning end over end. When the chaos finally subsided, Elliot opened his eyes to find himself staring at a sight unlike anything he'd ever seen. Through the cracked viewport, a sprawling alien city stretched out before him, glowing faintly with hues of blue, green, and gold. Towering spires made of crystal-like material reached toward the heavens, their surfaces shimmering like liquid rainbows. Bioluminescent plants swayed gently in the breeze, casting soft shadows on the ground below. Strange creatures flitted between buildings, their forms too fluid to fully comprehend. For a moment, Elliot forgot how to breathe. "Where am I?" he muttered aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Before he could answer his own question, the sound of approaching footsteps snapped him back to reality. Peering out the cracked viewport, he saw a group of figures rushing toward the crash site. They were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and exoskeletons that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Their faces, if you could call them that, were insectoid, with large multifaceted eyes and mandibles clicking rhythmically as they spoke in low guttural tones. Elliot's heart sank. Aliens. Of course, it had to be aliens. Summoning every ounce of courage he possessed, he unbuckled himself from the seat and pushed open the hatch. Smoke billowed around him as he stumbled out onto the ground, coughing violently. His jumpsuit was singed, his face smudged with soot, and his hair stood on end from static electricity. He looked ridiculous and completely out of place. The aliens stopped short, their glowing eyes fixed on him with expressions that were impossible to read. One of them stepped forward, raising a long, segmented arm in his direction. Elliot froze, unsure whether to raise his hands in surrender or bolt for cover. "I'm sorry," he blurted out, raising both palms in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to crash here. My ship exploded. I was just trying to survive." To his surprise, the alien tilted its head slightly, as though considering his words. Then, without warning, the creature pointed upward. Following its gaze, Elliot's eyes widened in horror. Above them, hovering in the sky like a second sun, was a massive dome-shaped structure. Inside, hundreds, if not thousands, of aliens gathered around what appeared to be some kind of ceremonial event. Streamers of light cascaded down from the ceiling, illuminating two figures standing at the center. A regal-looking female dressed in flowing robes and a male adorned with intricate armor. Even from this distance, Elliot could tell it was a wedding. A very important wedding. "Oh no," he whispered, realization dawning on him. "I crashed. Their wedding." As if on cue, the crowd below erupted into chaos. Screams echoed through the air as panicked aliens scattered in every direction. Guards armed with strange weapons rushed toward Elliot, their movements swift and deliberate. Within seconds, he found himself surrounded, their sharp-edged weapons trained on him like he was some kind of dangerous intruder. "What did I do?" Elliot cried, throwing up his hands again. "I swear, this was an accident." No one listened. The guards seized him by the arms, dragging him away from the wreckage. As they marched him through the streets of the alien city, Elliot caught glimpses of horrified faces peering out from behind windows and doorways. Whispers filled the air, though he couldn't understand a word of it. All he knew was that he had somehow managed to ruin the most significant day in this civilization's history. And judging by the looks on everyone's faces, he was about to pay dearly for it. Elliot's first impression of the Zitherians was that they were terrifyingly efficient. From the moment he was dragged away from the crash site, everything moved with a precision that left no room for error or mercy. The guards marched him through the glowing streets of their city until they reached an enormous structure at its heart, the Palace of Elders. Its walls shimmered like liquid silver under the dim light of twin moons, and its towering spires seemed to pierce the very fabric of the sky. Inside, Elliot found himself standing before a council of alien dignitaries seated in a semicircle on raised platforms. Their insectoid features were even more imposing up close, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the soft glow of bioluminescent lanterns hanging above. The air was thick with tension, and every click of their mandibles echoed ominously in the vast chamber. At the center of the group sat an elder whose exoskeleton gleamed brighter than the others, a sign, Elliot guessed, of authority or age. "State your name," one of the elders said, their voice translated into English by some unseen device. It sounded cold, mechanical, devoid of emotion. "Ah, Elliot Carter," he stammered, still trying to wrap his head around the fact that these aliens could understand him. I didn't mean to." "You have committed an unforgivable offense," the elder interrupted, raising a claw-like hand to silence him. "You disrupted the sacred union of Princess Valithra and Prince Krylos. Such an act is punishable by exile to the Void." Elliot felt his stomach drop. "The Void? What's that?" "It is a place of eternal darkness," another elder replied, their tone almost casual, as though discussing the weather. "No one who enters returns." "Oh, great," Elliot muttered under his breath. He forced himself to take a deep breath, reminding himself that panicking wouldn't help. "Look, this whole thing was a misunderstanding. My ship exploded. I wasn't aiming for your wedding dome. I didn't even know you existed until about 10 minutes ago." His words earned a ripple of murmurs among the council members. Some clicked their mandibles in disapproval, while others tilted their heads curiously. Elliot couldn't tell if they were considering his explanation or debating which method of execution would be most fitting. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, a new figure stepped forward. She was unlike any of the other Zitherians in the room, not because of her appearance, but because of the way she carried herself. Her slender frame was draped in flowing robes that shimmered like starlight, and her large, luminous eyes held an intelligence that made Elliot feel both small and seen. This, he realized, was Princess Valithra. "Elders," she began, her voice melodic yet commanding. "Perhaps we should hear him out before passing judgment. He claims to be unaware of our customs. Is it possible he speaks the truth?" The council erupted into heated discussion, their clicking and buzzing filling the chamber like a swarm of insects. Elliot watched nervously as Vylithra turned her gaze toward him. There was something in her expression, an intensity that made him feel like she was looking straight through him. Finally, the lead elder raised a hand to quiet the room. "Very well," they declared. "According to our laws, any outsider who disrupts a sacred event must face the trial of worthiness. If he fails, he will be cast into the void. If he succeeds," they paused, glancing at Vylithra briefly before continuing, "he may remain among us as an honored guest." Elliot blinked. "Wait, what? A trial? You're going to test me instead of just throwing me into whatever the void is?" The elder nodded solemnly. "It is tradition. Do you accept?" Did he have a choice? Elliot glanced around the room, taking in the stern faces of the council and the watchful eyes of the guards. Then his gaze landed on Vylithra again. There was something about her, something that told him she might actually care whether he lived or died. Swallowing hard, he nodded. "I accept." The next morning, Elliot stood in the middle of a vast arena surrounded by thousands of spectators. The trial of worthiness had begun, and already he regretted agreeing to it. The rules were simple enough. Complete 3 challenges designed to test intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Fail any one of them, and he'd be banished to the void. Succeed, and he'd earn the right to stay, and possibly avoid being executed for crashing a royal wedding. Challenge 1 awaited him in the form of a massive floating puzzle suspended in midair. Hundreds of glowing symbols rotated slowly, each connected by intricate lines that shifted whenever he touched one. According to the instructions given to him earlier, he needed to align the symbols in a specific pattern within a set time limit. To make matters worse, the platform beneath his feet began to tilt unpredictably, forcing him to focus not only on the puzzle, but also on keeping his balance. "This is insane," Elliot muttered, swiping at the symbols with trembling hands. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked furiously, his mind racing to decipher the logic behind the sequence. Minutes ticked by, and the crowd grew restless, their murmurs growing louder with each passing second. But then something clicked. Literally, as Elliot adjusted 2 final symbols, the entire puzzle lit up in a brilliant flash of light, signaling success. Cheers erupted from the audience, though Elliot barely heard them over the pounding of his own heart. Before he could catch his breath, Challenge 2 loomed ahead, a labyrinth filled with shifting gravity fields. Every few steps, the ground beneath him would flip sideways or upside down, forcing him to cling to walls or ceilings just to keep moving forward. It was disorienting, exhausting, and utterly terrifying. But somehow, Elliot managed to navigate his way through, relying on instinct and sheer determination. By the time he reached the 3rd and final challenge, Elliot was battered, bruised, and running on fumes. But he refused to give up. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. As he prepared to face the last hurdle, he noticed Vylithra watching him from the sidelines. For the briefest moment, their eyes met, and she gave him a subtle nod, a gesture of encouragement that filled him with unexpected resolve. Whatever came next, Elliot knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going down without a fight. The 3rd and final challenge of the trial of worthiness was unlike anything Elliot had faced before. It wasn't just a test of physical endurance or mental acuity. It was a test of adaptability, courage, and sheer willpower, all rolled into one. The arena transformed once again, revealing a towering crystalline spire that stretched high into the sky. Its surface shimmered with veins of energy, pulsing faintly as though alive. A narrow staircase spiraled around the spire, but it wasn't made of solid material. Instead, each step flickered in and out of existence like holograms caught in a glitch. "This is insane," Elliot muttered under his breath, staring up at the daunting structure. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him. Zetherians watching from the stands, their expressions unreadable behind their insectoid features. Among them was Princess Vylithra, her luminous gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made his stomach churn. She hadn't said a word since the trial began, but her presence alone was enough to keep him going. As the challenge commenced, energy storms erupted around the spire, sending bolts of crackling blue lightning arcing through the air. The crowd gasped collectively as Elliot took his first tentative steps onto the flickering staircase. Each step vanished moments after he placed his foot down, forcing him to move quickly or risk plummeting to the ground below. The higher he climbed, the more unstable the staircase became, and the energy storms grew fiercer, making every movement a gamble. Halfway up the spire, Elliot's legs burned with exhaustion, and his hands trembled as he reached for the next disappearing step. His mind raced, trying to calculate the safest path forward, but there was no pattern to the chaos. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, something unexpected happened. A soft hum filled the air, followed by a familiar voice. "Focus, human." Elliot glanced over his shoulder to see Valithra standing on a nearby platform, her robes billowing gently in the wind. Her appearance startled him, not because she was there, but because she shouldn't have been. According to the rules, outsiders weren't allowed to interfere with the trial. Yet here she was, defying tradition to offer him guidance. "What are you doing?" he whispered hoarsely, too tired to hide his confusion. "I'm ensuring fairness," she replied calmly, her voice carrying over the roar of the storm. "You've proven yourself capable thus far. Trust your instincts." For a moment, Elliot hesitated. Was this some kind of trick? Or was she genuinely trying to help him? Either way, he didn't have time to dwell on it. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. With renewed determination, he pushed onward, climbing faster despite the growing fatigue in his limbs. As Elliot neared the top of the spire, the challenges intensified. The energy storms converged into a single massive vortex, swirling violently around him. Lightning struck dangerously close, singing the edges of his jumpsuit and leaving scorch marks on the crystalline surface. The flickering steps disappeared almost instantly now, giving him mere seconds to react. But something had changed. Whether it was Valithra's words or the adrenaline coursing through his veins, Elliot found clarity amid the chaos. He stopped thinking about the consequences of failure and focused solely on survival. Each step became instinctual, his body moving with precision, even as his mind screamed at him to stop. When he finally reached the summit, Elliot collapsed onto the platform, gasping for air. The crowd erupted into cheers, their buzzing voices filling the arena like a tidal wave. He lay there for a moment, staring up at the twin moons above, feeling both triumphant and utterly spent. Later that evening, after the trial had ended and the crowd dispersed, Elliot found himself summoned to a private chamber within the palace. To his surprise, Valithra awaited him there, seated on a low bench surrounded by glowing plants that emitted a soft, soothing light. She gestured for him to sit across from her expression softer than he'd seen before. "You performed admirably today," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Few Zitharians would have succeeded against such odds." "Thanks," Elliot replied, still catching his breath. "Though I wouldn't have made it without your pep talk." Valithra's mandibles clicked faintly, a sound Elliot was beginning to recognize as amusement. "I merely reminded you of what you already knew. You possess qualities rarely seen among my people: improvisation, resilience, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty." Elliot frowned, unsure how to respond. "That's funny. Back home, those traits usually get me labeled as reckless." "Perhaps," Valithra mused, leaning back slightly. "But they also make you unique. Tell me, Elliot Carter, why did you agree to face the trial of worthiness? Most humans in your position would have fled given the chance." Elliot hesitated, considering her question. "Honestly, I didn't think I had a choice. But," he paused, glancing at her thoughtfully, "after everything I've been through today, the crash, the trial, I realized something. Maybe fate brought me here for a reason. If I can prove myself useful, maybe I won't be seen as just some clumsy guy who ruined your wedding." Valithra studied him silently for a long moment, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light. When she spoke again, her tone carried a note of vulnerability Elliot hadn't heard before. "You may not realize it, but your arrival has disrupted more than just a ceremony. My marriage to Krylos was arranged, a political alliance meant to strengthen our empire. Yet I cannot deny that I feel conflicted. Duty binds me to honor tradition, but curiosity drives me to seek something greater." Elliot nodded slowly, understanding dawning on him. "So, what happens now?" "That depends on you," Valithra replied, rising to her feet. "The council will convene tomorrow to discuss your fate. Until then, rest. You've earned it." As she turned to leave, Elliot called out impulsively, "Wait, why are you helping me?" She paused mid-step, glancing back at him over her shoulder. "Because sometimes change must come from the unlikeliest of places." With that, she exited the chamber, leaving Elliot alone with his thoughts, and a growing sense that his journey was far from over. The following morning, Elliot stood nervously in the grand hall of the Palace of Elders, awaiting the council's verdict. The towering spires and glowing lanterns that had seemed so awe-inspiring during his trial now felt suffocating, their beauty overshadowed by the weight of what was to come. He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, his mind racing with possibilities. Would they exile him to the void, or would they allow him to stay as an honored guest, whatever that meant? As the elders filed into the chamber, their clicking mandibles echoed ominously through the vast space. Valithra entered last, her presence commanding yet strangely comforting. She took her place beside the lead elder, her luminous eyes flickering briefly toward Elliot before returning to a neutral gaze. The tension in the room was palpable, and Elliot could feel every pair of alien eyes boring into him. The lead elder raised a claw-like hand, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "Elliot Carter," they began, their voice cold and mechanical. "You have completed the trial of worthiness, proving yourself worthy of remaining among us. However, your actions cannot be ignored. By disrupting the sacred union of Princess Valithra and Prince Krylos, you have violated one of our most cherished traditions." Elliot swallowed hard, bracing himself for the worst. But then the elder continued, their tone shifting ever so slightly. "According to ancient law, any outsider who disrupts a royal wedding must either leave Scifi forever or take the place of the original groom." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Elliot blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Wait, what?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Take the place of the groom? You mean marry Princess Valithra?" The elder nodded solemnly. "It is written. If you refuse, you will be cast into the void." Elliot's mind reeled. Marry the princess. This wasn't part of the plan. Assuming he'd even had a plan to begin with, his eyes darted toward Valithra, searching for some sign of how she felt about this bizarre twist. To his surprise, she met his gaze steadily, her expression unreadable but not hostile. Was she angry, resigned, or something else entirely? Before Elliot could process further, another figure stepped forward. It was Prince Krylos, clad in elaborate armor that gleamed menacingly under the light. His multifaceted eyes burned with fury as he addressed the council. "This is absurd," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "A human, a primitive creature from a backward species. How can you even consider allowing such filth to replace me as consort to the future ruler of Scifi?" Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd, many nobles nodding in support of Krylos' outrage. Elliot clenched his fists, resisting the urge to defend himself. He knew he didn't belong here, not really, but hearing it said aloud stung more than he cared to admit. To his relief, Valithra intervened, stepping forward with quiet authority. "Enough," she said firmly, her melodic voice cutting through the chaos. "Prince Krylos, your anger is understandable, but let us not forget the purpose of tradition. To ensure strength and unity for our people. Elliot has proven himself resourceful, courageous, and adaptable, qualities we need in a leader now more than ever. Krylos sneered, clearly unconvinced. And what of honor? Of legacy? Do you truly believe a human can uphold the values of our empire? Vaelithra turned to face him directly, her gaze unwavering. Honor is earned, not inherited. Legacy is shaped by action, not lineage. I will not dismiss Elliot's worth simply because he is different. Her words sent shockwaves through the chamber. Nobles whispered furiously among themselves, while Krylos glared at her with barely contained rage. Elliot, meanwhile, struggled to process what was happening. Vaelithra was defending him, not just as a participant in the trial, but as someone worthy of standing beside her. It was both humbling and terrifying. Finally, the lead elder spoke again, their voice carrying finality. The decision rests with Princess Vaelithra. Will she accept Elliot Carter as her husband, or shall we proceed with the original arrangement? All eyes turned to Vaelithra. For a moment, she stood silent, her expression contemplative. Then, without hesitation, she stepped forward and placed a hand on Elliot's shoulder. I choose Elliot, she declared, her voice ringing clear and resolute. He has shown qualities that align with the needs of our people. Together, we can forge a new path, one that embraces innovation and cooperation. The announcement ignited a firestorm of reactions. Some cheered, intrigued by the prospect of change, while others booed and jeered, outraged by the defiance of tradition. Krylos stormed out of the chamber, his armored footsteps echoing like thunder. Meanwhile, Elliot stared at Vaelithra in stunned disbelief. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly, leaning closer so only she could hear. "You don't have to do this for me." Vaelithra smiled faintly, a gesture that softened her otherwise regal demeanor. "I'm doing this for us," she replied, "for Cytheria, and perhaps for myself." As the council dismissed the assembly, Elliot found himself alone with Vaelithra once again. Despite the whirlwind of events, he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope, a fragile yet undeniable connection forming between them. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The days following Vaelithra's decision were a blur of activity for Elliot. Overnight, he had gone from being a crash-landed outsider to the future consort of one of the most powerful figures in Cytherian society. The transition was anything but smooth. Every aspect of Cytherian culture felt alien, literally and figuratively, and Elliot often found himself overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of their traditions, technology, and social structures. His first challenge came in the form of etiquette training. A group of stern Cytherian tutors was assigned to teach him the basics of royal protocol. From the way he walked to the way he addressed others, every movement and word was scrutinized under a microscope. At first, Elliot struggled to adapt. He accidentally offended several nobles by using the wrong tone during introductions, and nearly caused an international incident when he mispronounced the name of a visiting ambassador. But Vaelithra remained patient, gently guiding him through each misstep. "You're doing better than you think," she assured him one evening as they strolled through the palace gardens. The bioluminescent plants cast a soft glow around them, creating an atmosphere of serenity that contrasted sharply with the chaos of Elliot's daily life. "No one expects perfection overnight. I just feel like I'm faking it," Elliot admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Like any second now, someone's going to realize I don't belong here and kick me out." Vaelithra tilted her head slightly, her large eyes reflecting the shimmering light. "Belonging isn't about where you come from, Elliot. It's about what you choose to do once you arrive. You've already proven yourself capable of adapting." That's more than many Cytherians could say. Her words provided some comfort, but Elliot still couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a role far beyond his capabilities. Despite his doubts, he threw himself into learning everything he could about Cytherian society. He studied their history, their political systems, and their unique methods of communication, which included subtle shifts in posture and mandible clicks that conveyed entire sentences without a single spoken word. As he delved deeper into their world, Elliot began to notice things that troubled him. While Cytheria's upper classes lived in opulence, the lower classes seemed to exist on the fringes, their struggles largely ignored by those in power. During one of his rare excursions outside the palace, he encountered a group of workers laboring tirelessly in the fields, their exoskeletons dull and cracked compared to the polished gleam of the nobility. When he asked Valithra about it later, her expression grew somber. "Our society is built on tradition," she explained. "For centuries, the roles of each class have been rigidly defined. Change comes slowly, if at all." "But does it have to stay that way?" Elliot pressed. "Back on Earth, we learned that progress often starts with questioning the status quo. Maybe Cytheria needs someone willing to challenge these old systems." Valithra regarded him thoughtfully, her mandibles clicking faintly, a sound Elliot now recognized as contemplation. "You may be right," she said finally, "but change will not come easily. Many fear it, especially those who benefit from the current order." Despite the challenges, Elliot and Valithra grew closer with each passing day. Their bond deepened as they worked together to address the needs of their people. Valithra appreciated Elliot's fresh perspective, while Elliot admired her wisdom and determination. Together, they began implementing small reforms, improving working conditions for laborers, investing in education programs, and encouraging dialogue between the classes. However, not everyone welcomed these changes. Prince Krylos, still seething over the loss of his betrothal, saw Elliot as a threat to Cytherian purity and stability. He rallied allies among the conservative factions, spreading rumors that Elliot's influence would weaken the empire. His campaign gained traction, fueling tensions within the court. One evening, as Elliot prepared for yet another formal dinner, Valithra approached him with a look of concern. "Be careful tonight," she warned. "Krylos has been whispering lies to the council. He's trying to turn them against you." Elliot sighed, rubbing his temples. "Great, just what I needed. A palace full of aliens plotting my downfall." "They won't succeed," Valithra said firmly. "Not as long as we stand together." At the dinner, the tension was palpable. Krylos sat at the opposite end of the table, his piercing gaze fixed on Elliot throughout the meal. Conversations buzzed around them, laced with thinly veiled insults and veiled threats. Elliot forced himself to remain calm, focusing on Valithra's reassuring presence beside him. When the meal ended, Krylos cornered Elliot in a corridor, his armored frame towering over him. "You think you can waltz in here and take what's mine?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Mark my words, human, you'll regret ever setting foot on Cytheria." Elliot met his glare evenly, refusing to back down. "I didn't ask for this," he replied. "But I'm not leaving either. Not until I've done everything I can to help your people." Krylos sneered, stepping closer. "We'll see how long you last." As Krylos stalked away, Elliot exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall for support. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Valithra by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The tension in the palace was palpable in the days leading up to Elliot and Valithra's wedding. While public opinion had begun to shift in their favor, thanks to Valithra's carefully crafted speeches about unity and progress, a shadow loomed over the celebrations. Prince Krylos, fueled by bitterness and wounded pride, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to undermine them. His whispers of dissent spread like wildfire among the conservative factions of Cytherian society, painting Elliot as an outsider who sought to dismantle their traditions for his own gain. Elliot noticed the change almost immediately. The once warm glances from courtiers turned icy, and even some of the tutors who had been teaching him protocol began to distance themselves. When he asked Valithra about it, she admitted that Krylos's influence was growing stronger. "He's rallying those who fear change," she explained, her voice tinged with frustration. "They see you as a threat to their way of life." Elliot clenched his fists but forced himself to stay calm. "Then we'll just have to prove them wrong," he said firmly. "We've already started making things better for the lower classes. If we keep showing results, maybe they'll come around." Valithra nodded, though her expression remained troubled. I hope so. But be careful, Elliot. Krylos is dangerous. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. It wasn't long before Krylos made his move. Just 2 days before the wedding, guards stormed into Elliot's chambers early in the morning, dragging him from his bed without explanation. Confused and disoriented, Elliot was brought before the Council of Elders once again. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. Gone were the curious glances and murmurs of intrigue. Instead, the elders' faces were stern, their glowing eyes fixed on him with accusation. Elliot Carter, the lead elder, began, their voice cold and unyielding. You stand accused of espionage. Evidence has surfaced suggesting you were sent here by a rival faction to destabilize our empire. What? Elliot exclaimed, his heart racing. That's ridiculous. I'm not a spy. I'm just a guy who crashed here by accident. Krylos stepped forward, a smug grin spreading across his face. In his claw-like hands, he held a data tablet displaying documents, supposedly proving Elliot's guilt. These records were found in his quarters, Krylos announced, his voice dripping with triumph. They detail plans to sabotage key sectors of our infrastructure and incite rebellion among the lower classes. Elliot stared at the tablet in disbelief. The documents were forged. There was no doubt about it. But how could he prove it? His protests fell on deaf ears as the council deliberated quietly among themselves. Finally, the lead elder spoke again. Until this matter is resolved, Elliot Carter will be detained pending further investigation. No, Valithra shouted, stepping forward despite the guards' attempts to hold her back. This is absurd. These accusations are baseless. You know it, and I know it. The law must be upheld, the elder replied curtly. Even royalty cannot override justice. With that, Elliot was dragged away to a holding cell deep within the palace. The room was small and dimly lit, its walls lined with smooth metallic panels that reflected the faint glow of a single overhead light. As the door slammed shut behind him, Elliot sank onto the hard bench, his mind racing. How had Krylos managed to pull this off? And more importantly, how could he clear his name? Hours passed before help arrived, and it came from an unexpected source. A group of rebellious Etherians, disillusioned with the rigid hierarchy of their society, infiltrated the detention area and freed Elliot. Their leader, a wiry alien named Zenara, introduced herself with a fierce determination in her multifaceted eyes. Princess Valithra sent us, she explained. She believes in you, and so do we. Elliot hesitated, unsure whether to trust them, but Zenara pressed on. If you want to expose Krylos' lies, follow me. We know where he keeps his secrets. Together, they slipped through hidden passages beneath the palace, avoiding patrols of guards along the way. Eventually, they reached a secure chamber filled with holographic displays and data terminals. Zenara quickly hacked into the system, pulling up files that confirmed Elliot's suspicions. Krylos had forged the evidence against him as part of a larger scheme to seize control of Zetheria's resources and enslave its lower classes. This is it, Elliot whispered, downloading the files onto a portable device. This proves everything. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the chamber, signaling their discovery. Guards swarmed the area, forcing Elliot and Zenara to flee. Using the chaos to their advantage, they fought their way back to the surface, narrowly escaping capture. When Elliot finally reached Valithria, she embraced him tightly, relief washing over her features. You did it, she said softly. Now we can expose Krylos for who he truly is. The next day, during the climactic moment of the wedding ceremony, Elliot confronted Krylos publicly. Standing before the gathered crowd, he presented the stolen evidence, exposing Krylos' treachery for all to see. Gasps rippled through the audience as the truth came to light, and Krylos' allies abandoned him one by one. In the end, Krylos was stripped of his title and banished, his plans for domination crumbling around him. As the dust settled, Elliot turned to Valithra, meeting her gaze with newfound confidence. "We did it," he said, smiling faintly. "Together." And for the first time since his arrival on Cytheria, Elliot felt like he truly belonged. The aftermath of Krylos' exposure brought a wave of change that swept across Cytheria like a cleansing storm. The once rigid society, bound by centuries of tradition, began to loosen its grip on the past. With the truth laid bare before them, even the most skeptical nobles had no choice but to acknowledge Elliot's role in uncovering Krylos' treachery. What started as reluctant acceptance slowly transformed into genuine admiration for the human who dared to challenge the status quo. And won. Elliot and Valithra stood together at the heart of the palace, watching as the council formally stripped Krylos of his titles and banished him from Cytheria forever. It was a moment of triumph, not just for them, but for everyone who had longed for reform. As the disgraced prince was escorted away, his head bowed in shame, cheers erupted from the crowd gathered outside the palace gates. For the first time in generations, hope filled the air, a promise of brighter days ahead. Once the formalities were over, preparations resumed for the wedding. This time, however, the ceremony felt different. Gone were the rigid protocols and stifling traditions. Instead, the event became a celebration of unity and progress. Bioluminescent flowers adorned every corner of the grand hall, their soft glow casting an ethereal light over the guests. Music played, not the somber hymns of old, but lively melodies created using both Cytherian instruments and human-inspired rhythms. Even the food served during the feast reflected this newfound harmony, blending traditional Cytherian dishes with flavors inspired by earth. As Elliot prepared for the ceremony, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and disbelief. Just weeks ago, he had been a stranded engineer fighting to survive. Now he was about to marry one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy. Standing before a mirror, adjusting the ceremonial robes Valithra had gifted him, he chuckled softly. "I never thought I'd see myself doing this," he muttered aloud. Zinara, who had become something of an unofficial ally, grinned as she adjusted her own attire nearby. "You've come a long way, Elliot Carter. From crash landing to ruling alongside royalty. It's quite the story." "Yeah, well," Elliot replied with a shrug. "Let's just hope I can live up to it." "You already have," Zinara said earnestly. "People are starting to believe in what you and Valithra stand for. That's more than anyone could ask for." When the moment finally arrived, Elliot walked down the aisle toward Valithra, his heart pounding with anticipation. She stood at the altar, radiant in robes that shimmered like starlight, her multifaceted eyes glowing with warmth. As they joined hands, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the vast chamber. The officiant, an elder whose stern demeanor had softened since the trial, began the vows, speaking words that resonated deeply with everyone present. "To stand together is to embrace change," the elder intoned, their voice carrying a weight of authority tempered by wisdom. "To unite is to create strength. May your bond reflect the harmony we strive for as a people." As Elliot repeated the vows, he looked into Valithra's eyes and saw not just a princess or a leader, but a partner who shared his vision for the future. When it was her turn, Valithra's voice rang clear and steady, each word filled with conviction. By the time they exchanged symbolic tokens, a crystal pendant representing unity, the entire room seemed to hum with energy, as if the universe itself approved of their union. After the ceremony, the newlyweds stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. Below them, thousands of Cytherians celebrated beneath the twin moons, their laughter and music rising into the night sky. Fireworks exploded overhead, painting the heavens with bursts of color. Elliot leaned against the railing, taking it all in with a sense of awe. "This is incredible," he murmured, glancing at Valithra. "I still can't believe this is real." "It's real," Valithra replied, her tone gentle yet firm. "And it's only the beginning. Together, we'll build a future where everyone has a voice, not just the privileged few." Elliot nodded, feeling the surge of determination. We will. And maybe someday, humans and Cytherians won't seem so different after all. Valithra smiled, her mandibles clicking faintly in amusement. Perhaps. But for now, let us focus on the path ahead, one step at a time. As they stood there side by side, gazing out at the glowing city and the stars beyond, Elliot realized something profound. Home wasn't a place. It was the connections you forged, the lives you touched, and the legacy you left behind. He might never return to Earth, but he didn't need to. Here, among these strange yet beautiful beings, he had found purpose. And as the fireworks lit up the sky one last time, Elliot knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Valithra would face them together, as equals, as partners, and as harbingers of a new dawn for Cytheria.